Today we're going to talk about another category of eyeshadows that I absolutely adore, and that's ethereal purples. This was another requested video, and for good reason. Honestly, when I think of the word ethereal, I think of shades like these. I've got lots of options from indie to mainstream. And while I like to say this video is not comprehensive, I do have lots of options. What I'm going to do is try to tell you about the attributes of each one so that you can decide for yourself what type of formulas and shades might work best for you. I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like there's almost something in the air when it comes to ethereal purples. I think I've got something here for everyone, so let's go ahead and swatch and talk about these shades. I have several shades to show from Clionadh because in truth, they have a lot of really beautiful ethereal purples. The first shade I immediately thought of was Enamel. Mine has a significant dip in it, and at this point it's several years old, so I went ahead and purchased a new pan. That's how much I love it. This is a glitter multichrome, and one of the things I love about this shade is that it has a sort of kind of semi-sheer base. This makes it extra glowy, and it has kind of a blue and violet shift. Next we have the shade Regal. This is definitely in my top 10 from the brand. This is a glitter vibrant, and it has an indigo base with a gold and lime and turquoise shift. I like to think of the glitter vibrant multichromes as ones that have that same kind of glittery texture as the regular glitter multichromes, but a much more intense shift. Next we have the shade Royalty, and this is a vibrant multichrome. It's similar to Regal, but it doesn't have that glitter finish and a more purple than blue purple base, and it has a green, yellow, and pink shift to it. All three of these shades I've talked about so far from Clionadh I have backups of because I use them so often, and they're just exactly what I think of when I think of dreamy purples. Next we have the shade Rayonnant, which is one of the electric multichromes. These are a more pricey multichrome type in the line, but I absolutely love the electrics because they have a very smooth texture but really intense shift to them. They're definitely a formula that I think is very approachable to a lot of people. Rayonnant has a purple base with a little bit of pink in that base, and it shifts pink, peach, and lime. Compared to the last two shades I showed, it doesn't have as strong of a green shift. Next we have the shade Glazed, which is a glitter multichrome. And Glazed has a very kind of pale and lavender base. And to me, this has sort of subtle pinkish shifts. I think a shade like this is a really good option if you're looking for a very kind of pastelized and light purple. Next we have the shade Quest, which is another electric multichrome. It's another favorite of mine. It has an indigo base, and it shifts pink, peach, and chartreuse. I think I particularly gravitate to the shades that have a little bit more blue in them. There's just something very magical to me about blurple shadows. I know I don't really cover much nail polish content, but I also wanted to tell you that a lot of these shades are also available in their nail polish line. Next we have a bunch of shadows from Terra Moons. I had to start off with Reign of Terra. This has actually been around for years. It was one of the OG cosmic chameleons, and it's still very much a favorite of mine. It has kind of a bluish purple base, and it has a warm tone shift to it. So it's got this almost like warm toned reddish purple shift to it, and I just love the combination of warm and cool tones in a shadow. Next we have the shade Supernova Remnant. This is the type of shade I think really encapsulates the brand. In my opinion, Terra Moons really does make the shades with the most kind of intense and wild shifts to them. I would describe this as having a pale kind of purple base with an intense green and gold shift. And here it is in another lighting as well, just so you can see how insane that shift is. I think you can see a little bit of blue as well. And here is what all of the shades I just talked about look like swatched on my arm. And all of my labels are from the wrist down. This is a lighting where you can appreciate a lot of the sparkle of each shadow. And here's a view where you can really appreciate those shifts. I do have quite a few more shades to show you, so I'm going to keep things moving along. Next we have the shade Starburst, and this is another very pastelized type of lilac. It's got a pink, green, and gold shift. Compared to Supernova Remnant, which is very smooth, this one has larger kind of sparkle particles, so It is one that I would definitely apply with a glitter glue. In general, I would apply all of these shadows with a glitter glue just to get them to give you the most oomph and to minimize fallout. Next, we have the shade Pulsar, and I like to think of this as kind of like a very sparkly version of Reign of Terra. It has a blue-purple base and a very intense shift to pink, red, blue, and green. This is a newer shade, and a lot of the newer shades from Terra Moons have continued to become more sparkly and shifty over time. Next, we have the shade Iapetus, and I would describe this as being another very sparkly multichrome. It has a light lavender base, and it has a very strong pale gold shift, but it also has green and pink. I also wanted to mention earlier, but with a lot of very shifty multichromes, you can almost lose the base pigment when you apply them. That's where I think it's especially important to think about which mattes you're pairing with each shadow, because if you want this to pull a little bit more purple, you're going to want to pair it with purple mattes. Okay, now we have a few shades from Shine by SD, starting off with one of the metallic Mirage shadows. This is new to the lineup. What Shine by SD is most known for is sparkly shadows. I think that's where they are kind of unique, and all of the shades I've shown are sparkly, don't get me wrong, but there is an extra sparkle in these ones. This shade is described as being a dusty plum with hints of pink sparkle, and the way these look in the sunlight is just incredible. Next, we have the shade Game Over, and this is part of the Fantasy 2.0 line, so all the shades in this line have very intense shifts, but they still have an incredible sparkle. This has a light purple base, and it's got a strong yellow and green shift to it. And the Fantasy 2.0 shadows were reformulated last year to be less flaky in texture. Next, we have the shade Dazzle Me Crazy, which is a part of the Sparkletopia collection. The Sparkletopia shadows are incredibly sparkly and came out last year. It has a blue-purple base, and it's described as having an electric teal shift. So think about a shade like Royalty, but incredibly sparkly, because the Sparkletopia shadows really are some of the sparkliest eyeshadows out there. And here's what the last 6 shades I just talked about look like swatched to my arm. Lots of very intensely sparkly shadows in this bunch of shades. And here's what those shades look like swatched in a different lighting, so you can see those shifts a little bit better. Okay, the last set of single shadows that I have from indie brands are all from Touch of Glam Beauty. Touch of Glam does a lot of different formulas, and they do eyeshadows very well, but I think that what they're most known for are their holos and their grungy tones. That being said, I had a lot of really special purples from them. This one is called Purrrfect Holo. If you geek out over holographic eyeshadows, I highly recommend trying the ones from Touch of Glam, because they really are the most intense in my collection. Purrrfect Holo is described as having an eggplant purple base with a blue and green shift. The next shade that I have is called the Unicorn Puked, and you can depend on Touch of Glam to have the goofiest names for the shadows. This is in their birthday style formula, which is basically like shadows with really cool multicolored sparkles in them, and this one has a kind of deep blue-purple base, and it has green, pink, and gold sparkles throughout. Next, I have 3 shadows from the Color Me multi-line, and these shadows are all very intense, but they have an emollient texture. You actually only need the tiniest amount of product, and if you want to wear these just as a sheer wash of pigment, you could apply them with a fluffy brush. This is the shade Put You First, which is a blue-purple kind of shifting shade. Next, we have the shade Diamonds in the Sun, and this has a muted light purple base and a very intense golden shift with green and blue shifts as well. The intensity of these shadows really is something else, and I really do think it's the texture of these shades that allows it to be that way. However, it's not going to be the texture that works for everyone. Next, we have the shade Shine Me a Kaleidoscope. It's actually quite similar to Diamonds in the Sun, but I would say that it has a little bit more of a light blue-purple base. So it is going to be in that family of shades similar to Clionadh's Royalty, but the shift is more intense, and I think the finish just has sort of like a wetter look on the skin. And again, that comes down to the texture of the shade. And here's what all 5 Touch of Glam shadows I just talked about look like swatched to my arm. And that concludes the indie single shadows portion of the video. So now let's go ahead and get into some of the mainstream picks as well. The first one I'm going to talk about, I am so excited about because Juicy, one of my favorite C Beauty brands, came out with new shades in their viral jelly stick. They're one of the OG brands that did this formula. It's kind of water-based and they really dry down and stay put. They're multi-use, so you can use them on the face and on the eyes. This is the type of shade I would use more on the eyes myself, but this formula is so impressive. I will say you don't get much playtime, but they dry down, and once they dry down, they're gonna stay put all day. Next, we have Dusk Rush from KVD. I know I've talked about this formula a lot, but I really do think this is a beautiful ethereal purple. It's a Dazzle stick with a mid-tone purple base and electric blue sparkles throughout. If you're into the type of effect that you get with shades like Fembot and Solstice and Blushing Lizard, I think you would enjoy this shade. This formula is so beautiful and intense, and it wears really well on the lid. From Half Magic, we have one of their liquid shimmer shadows called Baby Bunny. I feel like people don't talk about this formula very often, but it's actually really good. It's very, very shiny and sparkly. It performs very well, and once you have it fully applied, it stays put. You don't get any fallout. In terms of the intensity that you get with this formula, it's very high. I would compare it to something like the Trixie Cosmetics liquid shimmers. And next, also from Half Magic, we have one of the sparkle sticks. This is the shade The Dreamies, and this is such a light, dreamy, ethereal purple. This formula from Half Magic has truly become beloved, and I think part of it is because it is a high impact, very sparkly shadow stick, and the applicator also makes it easy to use for other purposes like putting in the waterline or doing graphic looks or even adding to the lips to add a little bit of frostiness. I recently compared several formulas of eyeshadow sticks, so I'm going to go ahead and link that video in the cards. Next, we have two very ethereal purples from the recent Danessa Myricks Beauty Color Flicks Sticks line, and this is also kind of a water-based gel-like texture. Very easy to use, they stay put, there's no fallout. Meteorite is described as a holographic opal foil with indigo and lilac sparkle. And next we have the shade Starling, which is also from Danessa Myricks, and this is described as being a smoky lilac with an opal sparkle. It has a moodier vibe, and all of the shadow sticks from Danessa Myricks I actually talked about in a separate video, so I'm also going to link that up in the cards. All of the shadow sticks come as a duo, so it would be important to like both of the shades in each duo. Next, I also had to include one of the Shadow Sticks diamonds from Fenty, and this is the shade Miss Prissy. Now, Fenty has really gone in when it comes to lilac shade offerings this year, and I'm totally here for it. I think we've gotten 5 purple gloss bombs at this point. Miss Prissy has a lilac base, and it has silver, blue, and purple sparkles throughout. The last formula I'm going to talk about is from Violet FR. This is one of their U paints, which is one of the kind of liquid shadows. They have both matte and shimmer, and this one is a matte. It's called Nuage de Lilas. I think that this brand has some of the nicest liquid matte shadows that I've ever tried. The only thing is that they're definitely a little bit on the pricey side, and I wish they didn't dry out quite as fast as they did. And here's what all of the shades I just talked about look like swatched on my arm. I feel like we haven't gotten many palettes recently in mainstream beauty, but we have gotten some single shadows, so at least that's a win. And all of these shades are ones that I would highly recommend. I did want to mention a couple of eyeshadow palettes that also have dreamy ethereal purples. The first is from Danessa Myricks. This is called the Pastel Dream palette. It's currently out of stock, but I would be really surprised if it's not restocked at some point. But look at the ethereal purple shimmers in this palette. They have duochromes and multichromes. Like that first shade that I swatched is called Galaxy Crush, and it has a really intense shift. Now, I do think that you can get shades like this in indie, of course, but I do love to see mainstream palettes with shades this special in them. Next, I have 2 eyeshadow palettes from Clionadh Cosmetics, and they carry my favorite C Beauty brand eyeshadow palettes. They have the most intense shimmers, and it's because the owner is also an eyeshadow nerd. This palette is called Secret Garden 2. I would say if you are someone who's really into special shimmers, then you really must try Clionadh Cosmetics at some point, especially if there is a color story that speaks to you. The matte formula is also very nice. I know I've focused on the shimmers, but the mattes also are buildable and blendable, and they work and perform very well. Next, we have the palette called Violet Crazy, and this is basically a very kind of purple leaning palette. So if you're into ethereal purple tones, this palette actually has quite a few options in it, both in the mattes and in the shimmers. Here's what 3 of the purple shimmers look like swatched on my fingertips, and you can see that one of them is a holo. This brand also has a beautiful holo formula, and I'm not sure if I've mentioned that before, but they do. Here's what the whole palette looks like swatched on the back of my hand. One of the mattes didn't swatch super well, but I can tell you that it does perform well, so if that means anything, sometimes some of the mattes are a little bit powdery to swatch, but they do perform well when you're using them on the eyes. Okay, that's all of the ethereal purples I had to share today. I know it's been a little while since I've gotten to do this style of video, but I really hope that you found it helpful. Definitely let me know in the comments if you have any of the shades I mentioned in this video, or if you have any other favorites in the ethereal purple realm. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.